The room goes dark, the last glow of your phone screen fades, the house finally goes quiet, and for a moment, it feels like you might actually rest. Your body sinks into the mattress, your breathing slows, and then your brain clocks in for the night shift. Out of nowhere, the thoughts arrive, the email you forgot to answer, the bill you have not paid, that comment you made 3 years ago that suddenly feels like a crime against humanity. Your heart speeds up, your chest tightens, and it is as if your mind has been politely waiting all day just to attack you the second you try to sleep. Most people assume this means something is wrong with them. They think, if I was stronger, I could just switch off. If I had real discipline, I would not spiral like this at 2 a.m. In other words, nighttime overthinking becomes a secret moral report card. If you are calm, you are winning at life. If you are anxious, you are failing. However, this view is completely misguided. Your 2 a.m. brain is not a cruel judge exposing your weakness. It is an ancient survival machine running a protocol that no longer matches your environment. And this is not a poetic metaphor. This is because for most of human history, darkness was danger. Night was when predators hunted, temperatures dropped, and small mistakes could be fatal. In this scenario, a brain that relaxed too deeply at night did not pass on its genes. The brains that survived were the ones that stayed alert when things got quiet, scanning for any possible threat. And guess what? You still have that brain, only now, instead of listening for rustling bushes, it listens for unpaid taxes, awkward conversations, and vague fears about your long-term future. The problem is that your modern bedroom looks safe, but your inner environment does not feel safe. When the lights go out and distractions disappear, the systems that handle self-referential thinking and rumination switch on. The default mode network becomes more active, cortisol patterns shift, melatonin rises, and suddenly every small problem feels like a survival crisis. So when you lie there blaming your lack of willpower, your biology is quietly laughing. What feels like a failure of discipline is actually a predictable neurobiological response to quiet, darkness, and the absence of immediate reward or stimulation. Your brain is trying to protect your survival by running a last-minute audit of everything that might hurt you later. And here's the most important detail: your mind confuses worrying with solving. It believes that if it keeps you awake rehearsing every worst-case scenario, it is keeping you safe. It is not sabotaging you, it is overprotecting you using outdated rules. The effort you feel is your survival software, not your character, misfiring. So what if, instead of fighting that nightly audit, you learned to redirect it? What if you could turn those 2 a.m. mental attacks into a system that makes you calmer, more disciplined, and actually excited to go to bed? In the next part, we will unpack exactly what your brain is trying to do at night and how to redesign that ancient protocol so it finally works for your life instead of against it. So now that you know your brain is running a nightly audit, we need to talk about the story you were given about that audit, because this story is quietly brutal. Most people grow up with a simple narrative. Disciplined people just decide. They close the laptop at 10 p.m., they put the phone away, they stop worrying, they fall asleep on command. Weak people, on the other hand, let their mind run wild, keep scrolling, keep replaying every mistake. In other words, if you are lying awake at 2 a.m., your culture has already labeled you as the problem. This is because we've turned discipline into a moral scoreboard. You hear phrases like, no excuses, just control your thoughts, stop overthinking and do better tomorrow. The problem is that none of this matches how the brain actually works. It sounds powerful, but it is completely unscientific. It ignores that your brain's first job is not productivity, not positivity, not 8 hours of sleep. Its first job is survival. Think about the typical night. You promise yourself you will be in bed by 11. Then a notification pops up. A video auto-plays, an email reminds you of something you forgot. Suddenly your brain is juggling social comparison, unfinished tasks, and a flood of information. And guess what? The system that evolved to scan for threats and conserve energy is going to light up. You are not failing. Your ancient hardware is trying to run modern software it was never built for. Your brain did not evolve in a world of 24/7 light, infinite scrolling, and endless noise. It evolved in darkness with real predators, unpredictable weather, and very limited information. At night, quiet used to mean uncertainty. You could not see far. You did not know what was out there. So the brain developed a bias when the environment gets dark and still ramp up threat detection. In this scenario, your late-night rumination is that same system, now applied to emails, relationships, and bank accounts instead of rustling bushes. Here's the most important detail. When your mind attacks you at night, it is not judging your character. It is running a last-minute survival audit. Did we miss any danger? Did we forget anything that could cost us? That intense replay of awkward conversations, unpaid bills, and unfinished projects is your nervous system trying to protect your future, using a strategy shaped over millions of years. So your lack of discipline at night is not evidence that you are weak. It is evidence that your environment, your routines, and your expectations are colliding with an old survival design. Your willpower and motivation are getting crushed between your long-term goals and your brain's demand for immediate certainty and comfort. And this is where everything can change, because once you stop seeing your nighttime mind as a bully and start seeing it as an overprotective bodyguard, you stop asking, "What is wrong with me?" and start asking, "What is my brain trying to secure?" In the next part, we will unpack that bodyguard's exact checklist and how to retrain it so that for the first time, it actually tucks you in instead of keeping you on high alert. That overprotective bodyguard feeling is not an accident. It is the result of an ancient contract your brain signed long before there were mattresses, calendars, or notification badges. Your brain did not evolve to make you happy, deeply fulfilled, or perfectly disciplined. It evolved to keep you alive until tomorrow. This is because, for most of human history, the only scoreboard that mattered was survival. Do you make it through the night or not? So your brain was optimized for immediate threat detection, energy conservation, and rapid reactions, not for long-term peace of mind. And guess what? Nighttime used to be the worst possible time to relax. When the sun went down, you lost vision, you lost information, and you lost control of your environment. Predators hunted in the dark. Rival groups could approach without being seen. A strange rustle in the bushes was not a metaphor. It could literally be the end. In other words, the quiet, still, dark environment your modern self calls bedtime used to be the danger zone your nervous system was built to fear. So what did evolution do? It trained your brain to be extra alert precisely when things go quiet. When external stimulation drops, your internal alarm system turns up the volume. The same circuits that once listened for wolves now listen for unpaid bills, unread emails, and unresolved conversations. The problem is that your neural hardware cannot tell the difference between a rustling predator and a late tax notice. It just tags both as unresolved threat and keeps you awake to solve them. Here's the most important detail. You are running ancient survival software in a modern environment. In this scenario, your 2 a.m. spiral is your default mode network kicking in, replaying your day, scanning for anything unfinished, and mistaking rumination for problem solving. Your brain thinks, if I keep you thinking about it, I'm protecting you. You think, why can't I just switch off? This same conflict shows up with discipline. The brain that resists going to the gym is the same brain that resists fully relaxing at night. Hard work feels like spending energy without an immediate reward. Deep rest feels like dropping your guard without an immediate guarantee of safety. So your brain hesitates on both. It pulls you toward the couch instead of the workout, and then pulls you toward worry instead of sleep. From your perspective, you want long-term growth, consistent discipline, and deep, uninterrupted sleep. From your brain's default perspective, you should conserve energy now, avoid discomfort now, and stay alert to anything that might hurt you now. Those are not moral failures, they are design features. So the real conflict is not strong willpower versus weak willpower. It is your long-term goals versus an ancient operating system that never received the update. And the solution is not to yell at that system or force it harder. It is to redesign the way you work with it, so that feeling safe and conserving energy actually point in the same direction as your discipline and your sleep. In the next section, we will start building that design step by step, so your brain can finally stand down without feeling like it is abandoning its post. So let's make this conflict real, not in a lab, in your living room. You finish work, you tell yourself, I'm going to the gym. One part of your brain imagines the long-term reward, strength, health, confidence. Another part quietly looks at the couch and thinks soft, warm, zero effort. And guess what? That second part is older, faster, and has home field advantage. The brain did not evolve to prioritize your future physique. It evolved to prioritize survival and energy conservation. This is because in a harsh environment, wasting calories on unnecessary effort could literally kill you. In other words, your brain is still running a primitive equation. Known comfort now beats uncertain benefit later. The gym is effortful, unpredictable, and the reward is delayed. The couch is predictable, safe, and instantly soothing. Now watch what happens at night. The same software runs again. You tell yourself, tonight I'll sleep early, no distractions. But when you actually get into bed and turn off the lights, your brain suddenly offers you a menu, scrolling, background videos, random podcasts. None of these are amazing. They are just easy. They keep your attention pointed outward where nothing feels too dangerous. Lying quietly in the dark is the opposite. No noise, no distraction, just you and your thoughts. In this scenario, your threat detection system has nothing external to scan, so it turns inward. Old stress, unresolved conversations, future worries, everything you did not process during the day walks onto the stage. Your brain interprets this as exposure, vulnerable, risky. The problem is that your modern goals demand the exact states your survival brain resists: stillness, focus, uncertainty without immediate reward. Studying for an exam, writing a report, doing deep work, they all feel like lying in that dark room without distraction. You commit your attention, you invest effort, but there is no instant dopamine hit, no quick proof that it is working. So your brain does the same thing it does with bedtime. It offers you escape routes. Check your messages first. Watch one video. Tidy your desk, then start. It is not trying to ruin your discipline. It is trying to move you back toward predictable comfort and away from the discomfort of sustained focus. Here's the most important detail. Procrastination and avoidance are not evidence that you are lazy or broken. They are default protective behaviors. Your brain is minimizing perceived risk, emotional pain, and wasted effort. If anything, it is doing its job a little too enthusiastically. And those brutal 2 a.m. spirals? They are not a glitch unique to you. They are what happens when a brain optimized for short-term safety operates in a world that worships long-term discipline. Your environment gets quiet, your distractions disappear, and your survival system panics and calls an emergency meeting. The good news is that once you see this pattern, you can stop taking it personally and start redesigning the situation. In the next part, we will turn this same protective wiring into an ally, so your evenings, your work, and your sleep all pull in the same direction instead of tearing you apart. So now the village is quiet, the emergency meeting has been called, and modern life gives you one very specific instruction. Okay, brain, it's 11:07 p.m. Please stop. No more thoughts. Deep, restorative sleep. Now. This is the modern expectation. Be productive all day, switch between 10 different roles, absorb a fire hose of information, and then, at a precise time, flip a mental switch. No more emails, no more worries, no more feelings, just instant calm on command. And when that does not happen, you blame your discipline, your motivation, even your character. However, this view is completely misguided. In other words, you are asking a Stone Age machine to run a perfectly timed industrial era shutdown sequence. Your brain did not evolve to obey a clock. It evolved to obey danger, noise, light, and uncertainty. Imagine your brain as a slightly lazy but deeply paranoid hunter-gatherer. During the day, it strolls around camp, half paying attention, conserving energy, letting the chaos of meetings, notifications, and conversations drown out its deeper worries. But when the village finally goes quiet, when the fires burn low and the distractions disappear, that paranoid hunter suddenly sits up. Wait, did we miss something? And guess what? This is because for most of human history, nighttime was when bad things happened. Predators, rival tribes, storms. Silence was not relaxing, it was suspicious. So your survival system is biased to perk up when the environment calms down. The quieter your bedroom, the louder your inner lookout becomes. Here's the most important detail. Your brain actually has a network designed for this exact quiet time mode. It is called the default mode network, or DMN. When you are not focused on a task, this network lights up. It turns your attention inward. It reviews your past, imagines your future, and runs endless simulations about you. In this scenario, lying in bed in the dark is the perfect trigger. No tasks, no screens, or at least there should not be, no immediate demands. The DMN takes that as its cue. Great, now we can finally process everything. So it pulls up the highlight reel of past mistakes, future threats, awkward conversations, unpaid bills, and unfinished goals. Your brain presents this as a reward, as if it is doing you a favor. Look, we are protecting your long-term survival by not letting you forget this. The problem is that you are expecting peace while your biology is expecting patrol duty. You try to use willpower. Do not think about it, stop worrying, just relax. But willpower is a weak tool here. Trying to force your mind not to think at night is like trying to overpower a safety system that is literally designed to turn on when things get quiet. So the conflict is not you versus sleep. It is your scheduled bedtime versus an ancient night shift. In the next part, we will not ask this system to disappear. We will give it a job, a structure, and an environment, so your brain can feel safe enough to finally stand down. So now zoom out for a second. Your inner night shift is doing its job, but look at the world you're asking it to work in. Your environment is basically a supercomputer control room. Blue light blasting from multiple screens, infinite feeds, constant notifications, a calendar full of meetings with people you barely know. But inside your skull, the operating system was written for campfires, a few familiar faces, and threats you could see, hear, or run away from. The brain you're using to manage emails and quarterly goals is the same brain that once had one main question: is there something out there in the dark that could end my survival tonight? In other words, it was built for concrete, immediate danger, not abstract, long-term pressure. This is because, for most of human history, there was no such thing as inbox zero, sleep hygiene, or maintain your personal brand. There was, do we have enough food? Is the group okay? And what was that sound by the trees? That brain could handle short spikes of effort, then long stretches of low stimulation. Now look at your average day. You wake up to an alarm, check your phone, scroll through other people's lives, answer messages, jump into work, switch tasks 20 times, pretend you are calm on video calls, push down irritation, swallow embarrassment, and tell yourself you will deal with it later. And guess what? Your brain faithfully stores all of that later. The problem is that your modern environment never really lets your nervous system finish a stress cycle. There is always another tab, another ping, another micro demand on your attention. Your ancient hardware keeps saying, "We'll process this when it's quiet." Night becomes the only open slot on the schedule. So when stimulation finally drops, lights off, phone down, no more meetings, your default mode network, the system that turns inward and starts reviewing your life, powers up. All the emails you half ignored, the decisions you rushed, the awkward comment you made at 3:17 p.m., they line up like planes waiting to land. In this scenario, your brain thinks it is being responsible. It confuses rumination with problem solving. It believes that replaying that conversation 10 times is a form of discipline, a way to protect you from making the same mistake again. But here's the most important detail. By this point, your willpower is running on fumes. Decision fatigue has drained your mental energy. Your blood sugar is lower. Your circadian rhythm is shifting hormones so that emotions feel louder and threats feel closer. This is the worst possible time to ask your brain to be rational, calm, and perfectly disciplined. So what does it do? It defaults to autopilot. For some people, that autopilot is worry. For others, it is numbing with more screens, more scrolling, just one more episode. The brain is still chasing immediate comfort and reward, even while it tells you terrifying stories about your future. You lie there telling yourself to try harder, to stop thinking about it, to just relax. However, this view is completely misguided. You are asking Stone Age hardware to outmuscle a supercomputer environment with sheer motivation. If the system is this outmatched, is be stronger at 11:47 p.m. really a serious plan? Or do you need to redesign the night itself so that your ancient brain finally feels safe enough to stop working overtime? In the next part, we are going to do something your mind does not expect. We are going to steal a page from someone who has basically written the manual on not fighting your own brain. James Clear, the author of Atomic Habits, is not a motivational speaker telling you to just want it more. He is in a very calm way saying the opposite. His whole message is that your life does not change because you suddenly wake up with insane willpower. It changes because you quietly build small, repeatable systems that require less effort than your old ones. In other words, your brain does not reward heroic discipline. It rewards whatever is easiest and most familiar in the environment right now. And guess what? James Clear has a line that explains your 2 a.m. spiral almost perfectly. You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. During the day, that sounds like you do not become healthy just because you want a strong body. You become healthy because your kitchen, your schedule, and your tiny habits keep nudging you toward better choices. At night, it becomes even more brutal. You do not fall asleep to the level of your intentions. You fall asleep to the level of your pre-sleep systems. You can promise yourself, "Tonight, I will go to bed early and not overthink." The problem is that your brain does not care about that sentence at 11:47 p.m. This is because your threat detection system, your default mode network, and all the unprocessed stress of the day are now running on autopilot. If your environment is a bright screen, open notifications, zero wind down routine, and a bed you only associate with scrolling, your brain is simply following the system you already built. Here's the most important detail. Real discipline at night does not come from force. It comes from design. The people who seem naturally calm, who shut down work, dim the lights, read a few pages, and just fall asleep, are not superhuman. In this scenario, they have built invisible constraints. The phone lives in another room. The lamp is warm, not blinding. There is a tiny, almost boring ritual that starts at the same time every evening. From the outside, it looks like willpower. On the inside, it is architecture. The disciplined choice is simply the easy choice in that environment. This means you can do something radical. Instead of trying to overpower your brain's nighttime attacks, you can redirect the same protective instincts. You can teach your mind that safety lives in a predictable wind-down, in a written worry list finished before bed, in a room that slowly signals nothing to solve, you survive today. When you do this, your ancient survival hardware stops launching emergency meetings at 2 a.m. It starts treating sleep itself as the safest move. In the next part, we will turn this from theory into a concrete nighttime system your brain can actually follow, even on the nights it wants to panic. So before we build that system, we need to clear something huge. You are not failing at nights. Your design is colliding with your environment. The shame you feel about this, that heavy, sinking sense of, I should be able to just switch off, stop overthinking, be more disciplined, that is not only unfair, it is gasoline on the fire. Most people believe that if they were stronger, they would simply lie down, close their eyes and drift off. However, this view is completely misguided. This is because shame tells your brain you're in danger of being a failure, which your survival wiring hears as an actual threat. In other words, the more you beat yourself up for not relaxing, the more your brain thinks, Wiley, we are not safe. Stay alert. The problem is that your brain is actually doing its job. It was built to scan for threats, conserve energy, and run last-minute safety checks when the world gets quiet. From an evolutionary standpoint, nighttime was historically the most dangerous period, so when the lights go off and distractions disappear, your default mode network ramps up and starts replaying every unfinished task, awkward comment, an unpaid bill like a late-night audit. And guess what? Your environment and routines are unintentionally confirming, yes, bedtime is when we face everything we avoided. Lying in the same spot where you scroll through bad news, answer emails, and silently panic trains your brain that the bed is a problem-solving station, not a recovery zone. In this scenario, your 2 a.m. spiral is not a glitch. It is a learned association. So you start thinking, other people are just naturally disciplined. They read a page, turn off the light, and sleep. I'm broken. But here's the most important detail. Those people are not running on magical willpower. They are running on different systems. Their brain is getting different cues, different rewards, and a different story about what nighttime means. In this video, we are not going to judge you or tell you to just relax. Instead, we are going to explain what your brain is really protecting when it attacks you at night: your identity, your unfinished goals, your fear of losing control. We will look at why it chooses nighttime to do it, how hormones like cortisol and melatonin shift your perception, and how rumination tricks your brain into thinking worry equals action. Then we will build a new protocol. First, you will understand the mechanics, evolution, brain networks, and why motivation collapses when the lights go out. Next, you will map that science onto your actual evenings, your phone habits, your room, your pre-sleep rituals. Finally, we will turn these nighttime attacks into a training ground for discipline and calm, where every evening becomes a small, winnable rehearsal for long-term control. If your mind has been your enemy at night, the next part will show you how to make it your teammate. So let's zoom in on what that teammate is actually doing once the lights go out. Because when your room gets quiet and dark, your brain does not see a cozy modern bedroom. It sees the most dangerous time in human history. For most of our existence, nighttime meant one thing: vulnerability. Vision dropped, temperatures fell, and predators became active. In other words, the hours when you wanted to relax were exactly the hours when something with sharper teeth and better night vision might be moving through the bushes. The humans who survived were not the ones who slept like rocks. They were the ones whose internal alarm system was biased toward vigilance. And guess what? That same alarm system is still installed in your skull. Your brain was not built to make you happy. It was built for survival. This is because, from an evolutionary perspective, missing one real threat could be fatal, while overreacting to 10 false alarms cost only a bit of energy. So the system learned to overdetect. A twig snaps, treat it like a tiger until proven otherwise. Now bring that ancient wiring into your current environment. There is no tiger in your hallway. There is a phone charger, a laundry basket, and maybe a cat that believes 3 a.m. is parkour time. But your brain is still running the same protocol. Quiet plus darkness equals run a threat scan. Only now, instead of predators, it looks for anything unresolved, uncertain, or potentially painful. In this scenario, your rustling bushes are unpaid bills, that weird mole on your shoulder, the message you left unread, the project you have not started, and the conversation you have been avoiding for 3 months. Your brain flags them the same way it would flag movement at the edge of the firelight. It does not care that the deadline is 2 weeks away or that the doctor's appointment is already booked. It cares that something might hurt you socially, financially, or physically in the near or long-term future. Here's the most important detail. Those intrusive thoughts are not random cruelty. They are internal motion sensors going off. The problem is that the system cannot tell the difference between lion outside the cave and email to your boss. So it keeps you awake, convinced that replaying the awkward meeting one more time is a form of discipline and problem solving when it is mostly just burning energy. This is not a sign that you are weak, broken, or lacking willpower. It is a sign that your survival software has not been updated for modern life. Your brain is overprotecting you, using a strategy that made sense in the wild, but backfires in a one-bedroom apartment. Next, you will learn how to give this system new instructions, so the same brain that attacks you at night becomes the one that helps you wind down on command. To give your survival software new instructions, you first need to meet one of its main operators. Inside your brain, there is a system that loves quiet, loves downtime, and absolutely loves turning the lights off and replaying your entire life. It's called the Default Mode Network, or DMN. In other words, it's the brain's late-night cinema. It's not one single spot, but a set of regions that light up when you're not focused on an external task. When you're daydreaming in the shower, replaying a conversation, or imagining how tomorrow might go, that's your DMN running the show. During the day, your environment keeps this network partially suppressed. Emails, messages, traffic, meetings, notifications, the constant need to respond and perform, all of that pulls your brain into task mode. Your attention is pointed outward, so the inward movie stays dim. You still have background thoughts, but they are competing with immediate demands. At night, the situation flips. You lie in bed, the room is dark, the phone is finally down, or at least it should be, and external tasks vanish. And guess what? The DMN sees an opening. With no more deadlines and no more conversations, it comes fully online. The projector turns up to maximum brightness, and suddenly every unfinished task, awkward moment, and long-term fear gets a feature-length screening. This is because the DMN is designed to simulate. It replays the past so you can learn, and it imagines the future so you can plan. That can be incredibly useful. Thinking through a tough meeting, mentally rehearsing a presentation, or quietly reviewing your day can all be healthy DMN activities. The problem is that the network does not come with a built-in enough button. The DMN does not distinguish between helpful problem-solving and endless worry. To the network, running the same scene 50 times might feel like discipline and preparation, even if it is just draining your energy and stealing your sleep. In this scenario, your brain thinks it is earning a reward by keeping you safe from every possible outcome while you just feel trapped in mental quicksand. Over time, your brain learns patterns. If you repeatedly ruminate in bed, same pillow, same darkness, same position, your nervous system quietly records a rule. Bedtime equals worry time. Here's the most important detail. That association gets stronger with repetition, just like any habit. You are not only trying to fall asleep, you are fighting against a conditioned loop your brain believes is essential for survival. The good news is that networks can be retrained. You do not need more willpower at 11:47 p.m. You need a new protocol for the hour before sleep. By changing what you consistently do in that window, what you focus on, what you write down, what you allow into your environment, you can redirect the DMN instead of trying to shut it off by force. And the moment you start treating your late-night cinema like a system you can redesign, something surprising becomes possible. Because your late-night cinema is not happening in a vacuum. It's happening inside a body that is running a very specific 24-hour program. Your brain is not the same at 10 a.m. and 2 a.m. It is literally a different operating system. This is because you live on circadian rhythms, an internal clock that quietly choreographs almost everything. Your temperature, your hunger, your alertness, your hormones, even how dramatic your thoughts feel. During the day, that clock keeps you oriented toward action. Light hits your eyes, signals travel to the brain, and you get a cocktail of alertness chemicals that make emails, meetings, and basic discipline at least possible. In other words, your biology is biased toward doing, but as evening comes, the entire environment inside your body shifts toward shutting down. Melatonin, your main sleep hormone, starts to rise. Its job is not to knock you out instantly, it's to dim the lights on your inner stage. You feel heavier, slower, more drawn toward comfort. And that sounds peaceful, but here's the most important detail. As sleep pressure builds, your prefrontal cortex, the rational, planning, long-term part of your brain, starts losing power. The problem is that your emotional centers do not clock out at the same time. So you end up with this strange imbalance. The part of your brain that can put things in perspective is tired, but the part that can panic about your future still has enough energy to run. In this scenario, a small email you forgot to answer can suddenly feel like a career-ending catastrophe. A slightly awkward conversation from 3 days ago turns into everyone secretly hates me. Now add cortisol to the mix. Cortisol is often called the stress hormone, but it also follows a rhythm. It's usually lower at night and higher in the morning to help you wake up. And guess what? When that pattern glitches because of chronic stress, late caffeine, scrolling in bed, or just accumulated worry, you can get little cortisol spikes in the middle of the night. You wake up at 3:17 a.m. with your heart racing, brain instantly scanning for threats, even if the threat is just your to-do list. From the outside, it can look like you are being irrational or overly sensitive. On the inside, it is simply your survival software running on a nighttime setting that exaggerates everything. Your brain is not trying to ruin your life. It is trying to keep you alive with the tools it has. So when everything feels heavier at night, it's not proof that your life is falling apart. It's proof that your prefrontal cortex is offline, your melatonin is up, your cortisol is unpredictable, and your internal environment is stacked against calm problem solving. You are not weak for losing motivation or discipline at midnight. You are trying to do long-term thinking with a brain that is built for short-term protection in the dark. And once you see that your 2 a.m. spiral is mostly timing and chemistry, a new question appears. If you cannot change the clock, how do you change what your brain does with that fragile window before sleep? You already felt how bad the timing is. But here's the twist. Your brain actually thinks it's being useful when it keeps you awake. It doesn't see a 2 a.m. spiral. It sees a late-night strategy meeting. Most people believe that if they're worrying, they're at least doing something about the problem. However, this view is completely misguided. Your brain is wired to treat thinking about a problem as the same thing as working on it. And guess what? It does not care if that thinking is repetitive, circular, and completely disconnected from real action. As long as there is mental effort, your survival system checks the box. We're on it. This is because, for most of human history, running scenarios in your head before acting could literally save your life. If you heard a noise in the dark, imagining 10 possible threats before you moved was smart. In other words, rehearsal used to equal protection. So when you lie down at night and the environment finally goes quiet, your default mode network lights up and says, "Perfect. Now we can rehearse everything that might hurt us." Here's the most important detail. Your brain does not distinguish between productive problem solving and pure rumination. The same circuits fire whether you're planning tomorrow's presentation or replaying that weird laugh you did in a meeting 3 weeks ago. In this scenario, you are lying in bed at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling, replaying one awkward comment from that meeting. Your brain zooms in frame by frame as if analyzing it hard enough will protect you from future rejection. But nothing in reality changes. You are not talking to your boss. You are not improving your skills. You are just burning energy in a mental simulator with no output. The problem is that this simulator is rewarding itself. Each time anxiety shows up and you respond by thinking more, you teach your brain a rule. When I feel uncertain, I worry. That becomes a worry loop. The emotion triggers the thought slightly reduces the feeling for a moment, and your brain takes that as proof that worry is the correct response. Over time, it becomes automatic. No conscious willpower, no decision, just habit. So at night, when uncertainty is highest and distractions are lowest, those loops run wild. Worst case scenarios about money, imagined arguments that never happened, a running list of unfinished tasks. Your brain is convinced this mental audit is protecting your long-term survival, even as it destroys your immediate sleep. You do not need to stop your brain from trying to protect you. You will lose that fight. What you can do is give it a better, earlier place to run its audit, structured, contained, and tied to real action, so it does not hijack your nights. And once you see how to move that process on purpose, you can turn worry from an automatic loop into a disciplined system that finally lets you rest. So let's zoom in on what actually happens between your busy afternoon and that brutal moment when your head hits the pillow and your brain suddenly turns into a highlight reel of everything that could go wrong. During the day, your environment is doing you a strange favor. Every notification, every email, every tiny task acts like a dam. It holds back the deeper thoughts, the unresolved emotions, the uncomfortable decisions waiting underneath. You jump from meeting to message to podcast, and your brain gets just enough immediate stimulation to postpone the hard stuff without you even noticing. The problem is that this dam is built out of distraction, not resolution. Over millions of years, your brain learned to conserve energy and chase quick reward. In other words, if it can swap painful reflection for a small hit of comfort, scrolling, snacking, checking something urgent, it will. And this is because, from a survival perspective, anything that feels emotionally risky looks like a threat, and your brain is wired to move away from threat as fast as possible. Then night comes, the emails slow down, the lights dim. You finally put the phone away, or at least you tell yourself you will. And guess what? The external noise drops, the dam loses pressure, and everything you pushed aside all day has only one place left to go, straight into your awareness. In this scenario, your brain is not inventing new problems at 11:47 p.m. It is unloading a backlog. Think about the nights you scroll social media until you are absolutely exhausted. Then you roll over, close your eyes, and instantly get flooded. Money you have not managed, work you are behind on, that conversation you avoided, your health checkup you keep postponing. It feels like an attack, but it is really unpaid invoices of attention finally being delivered. Here's the most important detail. Your brain is not choosing nighttime to punish you. It is choosing the only quiet window it can find. When the default mode network kicks in, the system that starts wandering, reflecting, imagining whenever you are not actively doing something, it looks around for unfinished business. If you have not given it any disciplined space earlier, the only remaining slot is the moment you are trying to fall asleep. So the spiral is not a moral failure or a lack of willpower in bed, it is a scheduling problem. You tried to cram a full day of emotional bookkeeping into the last 10 minutes of consciousness. Of course it feels overwhelming. Of course your motivation to rest loses against your brain's drive to secure long-term survival. The good news is that dams can be redesigned. If you create small structured processing windows earlier, 10 minutes after work, a simple worry list before dinner, you start releasing pressure in controlled doses. You do not need more discipline at midnight, you need better design at 4 p.m. And once you see how to build those windows into your day, something surprising happens at night. Something surprising happens at night. Your brain does not suddenly become cruel, it becomes efficient. It runs on what psychologists call cognitive ease, a built-in preference for whatever feels familiar, low effort, and immediately rewarding. In other words, your brain is always asking one quiet question. What is the easiest way to feel a little safer, a little more comfortable right now? This is because, from a survival point of view, wasting energy on hard, uncertain actions was dangerous. So the brain learned to love shortcuts, reaching for the predictable reward, repeating the familiar thought, following the same path as yesterday. And guess what? That same ancient shortcut system is exactly what shows up when you turn off the lights and say, okay, time to sleep. Notice what happens in this scenario. You lie down, the external stimulation drops. No emails, no meetings, no noise. Your default mode network, the part of the brain that lights up when you are not doing anything in particular, suddenly has center stage. The problem is that it does not naturally drift toward calm. It drifts toward whatever is most practiced, most available, and most emotionally charged. Grabbing your phone is cognitive ease. The screen is bright, the feed is endless, the reward is immediate and predictable. Turning on a show is cognitive ease. You know the characters, you know nothing is required from you. Even mentally replaying the same 3 worries is cognitive ease. Those fears are familiar. They cost less effort than facing the raw discomfort of stillness and uncertainty. Here's the most important detail. By the time you notice you are scrolling, or you suddenly realize you have been spiraling about that conversation from 3 years ago, the decision has already been made. Your brain followed the path of least resistance before your conscious discipline even woke up. It felt a tiny spike of uncertainty and instantly reached for the easiest available escape in your environment. This is the same mechanism that makes it hard to start a workout, open a blank document, or sit down for deep work. Your long-term goals live in one part of the brain. Your immediate comfort lives in another. At 6 a.m., that conflict shows up as, I will go to the gym after one more scroll. At 11:30 p.m., it shows up as, I will sleep after one more episode, after I solve my entire life in my head. So your night discipline is not a separate problem. It is the exact same cognitive ease, just wearing pajamas. The good news is that you do not win by fighting this wiring with more willpower. You win by redesigning what the easy path looks like. If, in your environment, the lowest effort option before bed is calming, contained, and finite, your brain will take it. In the next section, we will turn your evenings into a kind of psychological choice architecture, where the lazy option is finally the one that helps you sleep. So now you've made the easy option at night more calming, but there's still an invisible war happening in your bed that you keep blaming on no discipline. And guess what? It's not a discipline problem. It's a design conflict. Your goal is actually very clear. You want to lie down, fall asleep without a fight, and wake up clear-headed instead of feeling like you survived a psychological car crash. You want nights that quietly reinforce your discipline, consistent bedtimes, a brain that powers down on command, and mornings where you're not dragging around the weight of another 3-hour overthinking session. In other words, you want your nights to be a training ground for the life you're trying to build, not a nightly ambush. But your brain's default goal is completely different. Your brain is not trying to optimize your long-term growth. It is trying to keep you alive until tomorrow morning using the least effort possible. This is because, for most of human history, the dark was when predators, enemies, and real physical danger were most likely. So your brain prioritizes survival, comfort, and energy conservation right now. It wants to avoid any discomfort in this moment, and it would rather stay alert to potential threats than relax into deep sleep. The problem is that these two goals collide the second the lights go off. You want rest and peace. Your brain wants to double-check every unresolved email, conversation, bill, and embarrassing memory as if they were rustling in the bushes outside your cave. The default mode network spins up, there are no distractions, and suddenly your mind launches a last-minute audit of everything that might hurt you socially, financially, or emotionally. In this scenario, your brain thinks it's doing night security. You experience it as an attack. Let's give this a name: the survival versus growth battle. On one side, your long-term self, who cares about discipline, sleep, and clarity. On the other, your survival brain, who cares about not being surprised by pain. When you don't name this design conflict, you turn it into self-hatred. You lie there thinking, why can't I even control my own mind? What is wrong with me? Here's the most important detail. Misreading this conflict is emotionally brutal. You start to believe you're failing at life because you can't do something as basic as fall asleep. You wake up exhausted, ashamed, and already behind, so you need more stimulation and more comfort during the day, which gives your brain even more unresolved material to process at night. Once you see it as a design conflict, you can stop arguing with your brain's purpose and start changing its protocol. In the next section, we'll turn this survival versus growth battle into a simple nighttime contract so your brain feels safe enough to stand down and finally let you sleep. Once you see it as a design conflict, something else becomes obvious. Your 2 a.m. battle is not a test of character, it's a rigged game of biology. And in that game, there is one brutal rule you cannot escape. Willpower always loses at midnight. You've probably heard the phrase, motivation is overrated, environment is more important. During the day, that sounds like a productivity quote. At night, it's a survival law. This is because by the time you crawl into bed, your brain has made hundreds, sometimes thousands, of tiny decisions. What to answer, what to ignore, what to eat, what to say. Every choice drains a little bit of cognitive fuel. By evening, decision fatigue is not a metaphor. It's a measurable drop in your ability to resist the easiest reward. In other words, the part of your brain that cares about long-term discipline is low on energy, while the part that loves immediate comfort is still very much awake. So when you finally hit the pillow and think, I'll just quickly check my phone, your brain is going to pick the path that costs the least effort and feels the most soothing right now. And guess what? That path is almost never deep sleep and serene breathing. It is scrolling. It is replaying that awkward conversation from 3 years ago. It is mentally solving every possible disaster scenario before tomorrow's meeting. In this scenario, your tired brain is not asking, what will help my future self? It is asking, what will reduce my tension in the next 30 seconds? Here's the most important detail. When you are exhausted, your brain defaults to autopilot. Autopilot is just a collection of habits that your nervous system has tagged as fast relief, low effort, checking notifications, opening the same app, starting the same worry loop. None of these require discipline. They run themselves. The problem is that most people try to fight these autopilot behaviors using the one resource that is already empty, willpower. So you lie there and make promises, tonight I'll be stronger, tonight I won't scroll, tonight I'll just breathe and think positive. But biologically, you are negotiating from a position of weakness. Your sleep pressure is high, your emotional brain is louder, your rational brain is slower. If your whole strategy is, I'll just be better this time, you are literally betting against your own wiring. You might win for a night or two. Over weeks and months, fatigue wins. The only sustainable option is to switch sides. Instead of trying to overpower your nighttime brain, you design your environment so that your autopilot serves your sleep instead of attacking it. Phone out of reach, dim lights that cue melatonin. A tiny, scripted ritual your brain can follow without thinking. In other words, you make the easiest behavior the one that protects you. Because when midnight comes, you will not rise to your level of motivation. You will fall to the level of your design. And in the next part, we're going to turn that nighttime contract into a step-by-step setup, so that by the time your head hits the pillow, the game is already fixed in your favor. So let's pull the camera back for a second. Up to now, you've seen that your late-night chaos is not random. You have an ancient survival brain running on threat detection and energy conservation, suddenly dropped into a dark room with no distractions. The default mode, network flips on, hormones shift, and your mind starts scanning for danger, replaying mistakes, and magnifying every unfinished task. In other words, your 2 a.m. brain is doing its job, just in the wrong century. This is because your wiring was built for nights in the wild, not nights with email, bank accounts, and unread messages. When external stimulation drops, the DMN says, perfect, now we can review every possible threat. Cortisol patterns change, melatonin rises, and emotions feel bigger. The problem is that your survival system is trying to protect you from social embarrassment, overdue bills, and vague future failure, as if they were predators lurking in the dark. So you get this design conflict. Your survival brain wants immediate comfort and certainty. Your growth goals live in the long term and require effort, ambiguity, and delayed reward. During the day, distractions keep that conflict blurry. At night, with nothing else to do, it becomes brutally clear. And guess what? Your brain solves that tension the only way it knows how. Worry now, sleep later. But here's the most important detail. Understanding this is not just an interesting theory, it is the blueprint. Once you see that your brain is following a script, you can stop negotiating with it and start rewriting the script itself. You do not need more willpower at midnight. You need a better design that your brain can run on autopilot. That's where protocols come in. Most people make promises. Tonight, I will go to bed early, I will not scroll, I will not overthink. In this scenario, you are asking your exhausted, hormone-tilted brain to win a debate against its own survival software. Of course it loses. A protocol is different. It is a pre-decided sequence your brain can follow without discussion, like, after I brush my teeth, I write down tomorrow's 3 main worries and 1 action for each. Then I plug my phone in outside the bedroom. We're going to build protocols like that. Pre-sleep rituals that bleed off mental pressure before you lie down. Structured worry time that teaches your brain we do our problem solving at 7 p.m., not 2 a.m. Environmental constraints that make the path to calm the easiest one. Dimmed lights, no laptop in bed, a book already waiting on your pillow, and subtle identity shifts. So bedtime stops meaning battle with my thoughts and starts meaning this is when I act like a disciplined, calm person. And here's the twist. The same brain that currently attacks you at night can become your ally. If you train it with the right cues and rewards, it will start nudging you toward these calming routines automatically. In the next section, we'll turn this from theory into a concrete nighttime architecture you can literally set up today, so that by the time darkness falls, your survival brain is already working for your long-term self, not against it. So now you have a calming pre-sleep system. But if your bed itself still screams battle station, your brain will ignore all of it. Most people think the problem is their thoughts. However, this view is incomplete. Very often, the real trigger is the environment you're lying in. Your brain is a pattern-matching machine. It links contexts and behaviors like a strict internal accountant. If night after night you crawl into bed and start worrying about money, replaying arguments, scrolling through bad news, or even answering work emails, your brain learns a simple rule. When we get in this rectangle, we stay alert. In other words, the mattress becomes a cue for problem solving, not for rest. And guess what? This is not just a metaphor. This is classical conditioning in action. Just like Pavlov's dog started salivating at the sound of a bell, your nervous system starts firing up the moment you see your pillow. You have repeatedly paired lying down with mental combat, so now simply turning off the light can trigger a spike of anxiety even on a relatively calm day. The problem is that your survival brain thinks it is helping. It has learned that the safest move in this scenario is to stay mentally awake in bed, scanning every possible threat before you dare to relax. This is because, historically, dropping your guard at night could mean danger. Your modern bed becomes a cave entrance your ancestors would have guarded. So we use discipline not to fight this, but to retrain it. The method is called stimulus control. You deliberately reserve the bed for sleep and maybe 1 or 2 other consistent activities like intimacy or a short wind-down reading ritual. The goal is simple. Teach your brain over and over that bed, low effort, low thinking, high comfort. Here's the most important detail. You do not do your worrying in bed anymore. If you are lying there for more than 15 to 20 minutes, mind racing or doom scrolling, you gently get up. No drama, no self-attack. You move to a chair, the couch, or a small worry desk. That is where you write down fears, make a plan, or even scroll for a bit if you must. Bedtime is no longer negotiation time. Then only return to bed when you are genuinely sleepy, not just tired of fighting with your thoughts. At first, this can feel like more effort, but you are casting votes for a new association every single night. Over time, your brain starts predicting calm instead of attack when you touch the sheets. It is not about perfection. Some nights you will slip, and that is fine. What matters is the direction of training. In the next section, we will turn your entire bedroom into a physical script that makes this new association almost automatic. You just told your brain, bed equals calm. But there is still one problem. Your brain does not like unresolved tabs. If you do not give it a place to process them during the day, it will happily schedule a survival audit for 2 a.m. Researchers have found something very specific here. When people engage in loose, unstructured worry right before bed, they take longer to fall asleep and report more rumination. In other words, lying there and thinking it through feels productive, but it actually trains your brain to associate darkness with danger scanning. However, when people schedule a short, structured worry time earlier in the evening, nighttime overthinking drops dramatically. This is because your brain does not just care about comfort, it cares about control. It wants to know, are we on top of the threats or are we ignoring them? So you're going to give it what it wants, on your terms. Here is the 15-minute mental download. Sometime in the evening, at least an hour before bed, you sit down with a notebook. No phone, no distractions. You set a timer for 15 minutes. Then you write every worry, every unfinished task, every decision you are avoiding, and, crucially, the very next concrete step for each one. Not the whole solution, just the next action and when you will do it. And guess what? The goal is not to solve your life in a quarter of an hour. The goal is to show your brain that nothing is being ignored. Those financial fears? Email accountant Tuesday at 3 p.m. That relationship tension? Schedule conversation this weekend. Your brain sees captured, seen, scheduled. Threats are now in the system. Here's the most important detail. When the timer ends, you stop, even if you are mid-sentence. You are teaching your brain that there is a clear container for this audit. Outside of that container, especially in bed, you are closed for business. If a thought pops up later, you gently tell yourself, already on the list, we will handle it at tomorrow's download. Imagine someone who has been attacked by their thoughts every night for months. They try this for 1 week. The first 2 nights, their brain still knocks loudly at 2 a.m. By night 4, the intensity has dropped. By night 7, the attacks show up more like whispers than alarms. In this scenario, the brain has learned there is now a designated survival audit at 7:30 p.m. It no longer needs to hijack the night shift. The problem is that most people only face what they fear when they are exhausted and alone with their thoughts. This practice flips that. It is a discipline habit disguised as kindness. You are using your daytime energy and motivation to look directly at what you have been avoiding in a structured environment, instead of letting it explode when you are most vulnerable. And this little notebook session is about to become even more powerful, because next, you will design your physical bedroom so that every object around you reinforces this new rule. The audit happens out there, not in here. So now your notebook lives outside the bedroom. Perfect. But there's still one problem. Most people treat sleep like jumping off a cliff. One moment you are answering emails, watching intense videos, solving problems. The next moment you expect your brain to just power down. No wonder it rebels. Your brain is not a light switch. It is more like a plane coming in to land. It needs a runway. This is because all day long, you are in high stimulation, threat detection, problem-solving mode. Cortisol has been helping you stay alert. Your default mode network has been partially occupied with tasks. And then suddenly you lie in the dark with nothing to do. In other words, you slam on the brakes at full speed and hope the plane stops before the edge. The problem is that this instant sleep fantasy ignores how survival wiring works. When the environment goes quiet and there is no clear structure, your ancient brain does not think, spa time. It thinks, wait, what did we miss? Are we safe? Did we forget something important? That is when the mental attacks start, replaying conversations, scanning for mistakes, inventing disasters. So instead of dropping off a cliff, you build a runway, a simple, repeatable pre-sleep ritual. Think of it as a tiny evening script. At a fixed time, you shut down work. Not when I feel done, but a clear line. Laptop closed, notebook parked outside the bedroom. Then you dim the lights so your brain gets a physical cue that the day is ending. Screens either go away or shift to low stimulation. No news, no work, no intense feeds. After that, you insert calming, low-effort activities, 10 minutes of light reading, 2 minutes of stretching, a short, familiar journaling prompt if you want to capture anything left in your head. And guess what? The exact activities matter less than the fact that they are gentle, predictable, and always in the same order. Here's the most important detail. Consistency turns this from a nice idea into a neurological shortcut. When you repeat the same small sequence in the same order at roughly the same time, your brain starts to anticipate the next step. In this scenario, the ritual itself becomes a cue. We're safe, we're closing the day, sleep is coming. Over time, you need less willpower and less motivation because the pattern runs on its own. This is cognitive ease working for you instead of against you. You are making the disciplined choice, the wind down, feel easier, more comfortable, and more rewarding than continuing to scroll or work. The environment does half the discipline for you. Low light, no work tools in sight, soothing activities within arm's reach. And you are not doing this as a chore. You are building a system that protects your future self. Each night you run the sequence, you are teaching your brain a new association. Bedtime is safe, structured, and not a place for surprise audits. In the next part, we will go one level deeper and shape the physical bedroom itself so that even half asleep, the path of least resistance leads you toward rest, not rumination. So, now your brain has a simple pre-sleep sequence, but there's still one problem. At 11:47 p.m., your tired self does not care about sequences. It cares about comfort and the easiest available reward. This is because in that moment, your brain is running on low energy and default survival code, avoid effort, seek relief right now. Most people treat this as a willpower problem. I should just be stronger, I should just not scroll. However, this view is completely misguided. What you are really fighting is not morality, it is physics. In other words, your behavior follows the path of least resistance in whatever environment you are standing in. So the game now is constraints. Constraints are like child locks you put on your own life. You deliberately limit your options so that your future, half-asleep brain literally cannot choose the most destructive thing. Not because you suddenly became a monk, but because the bad choice is now inconvenient, clumsy, or impossible. Take your phone. If it sleeps beside your pillow, your brain knows that instant stimulation is one thumb away. In this scenario, you are asking your 2 a.m. self to win a wrestling match with infinite content. Instead, you charge the phone outside the bedroom. Maybe it lives on a dresser in the hallway, plugged into a cheap alarm clock stand. Same device, different environment, completely different odds. And guess what? The moment you have to physically get out of bed, walk into the hall, and stare at a bright light, the path of least resistance flips. Staying in bed becomes easier than starting a new scrolling session. That is discipline by design, not discipline by heroic effort. You can stack more of these constraints. Apps that lock social media after 10:30 p.m, so you would have to go through 3 annoying steps to override them. Lamps on timers that start dimming at your target wind-down time, so the whole room quietly whispers, "We're done for today." An alarm across the room, so snooze requires standing up, not just twitching your thumb. Here's the most important detail. None of this means you are weak. The problem is that people confuse freedom with unlimited options. Highly disciplined people do the opposite. They outsource self-control to their environment so their brain does not have to negotiate every night. Olympic athletes do this. Top performers do this. You are just applying the same logic to sleep and anxiety. You are not trying to control everything. You are strategically removing the easiest sabotage routes, the glowing screen, the instant notification, the ability to lie in the dark and marinate in stimulation. When those exits are blocked, calm becomes the new default because chaos now requires more effort than rest. In the next part, we will take this even further and redesign the meaning of your bedroom itself so that the moment you cross that doorway, your brain automatically shifts from solve and scroll to release and recover. So now your bedroom is starting to act like a cue for release and recover. But there's another layer you have to redesign, otherwise the old pattern sneaks back in through the side door, the way you see yourself at night. Most people quietly carry an identity like a diagnosis. I'm just a bad sleeper, I'm an overthinker. I have no discipline at night. The problem is that once your brain buys this story, it starts filtering every experience to confirm it. One rough night? See, that's just who I am. 2 a.m. spiral? Of course, my mind always attacks me. In other words, the identity becomes the script and your behavior just reads the lines. But here's the most important detail. You are not the person your 2 a.m. thoughts say you are. Those thoughts are generated by a survival-focused brain running outdated software in a quiet environment. They are loud, they feel true, but they are not your identity. Your real identity is the person who is learning to build systems that keep your brain and body on the same team. This is because identity is not something you declare once. It is something you vote for repeatedly with tiny actions. James Clear calls this identity-based habits. Every action is a ballot cast for the kind of person you believe you are. When you run your pre-sleep ritual, even if it is just 2 minutes of stretching and 1 page of reading, you are voting for, I am someone who respects my energy and my rest. When you do a quick mental download before bed, writing down tomorrow's tasks, naming the worries your brain keeps waving at you, you are not just doing a productivity trick. You are voting for I am someone who does not outsource my peace of mind to random midnight panic. And guess what? Your brain pays attention to these votes, especially when they are consistent. In this scenario, discipline is no longer you heroically wrestling your thoughts every night. It is you designing constraints that protect you from the worst version of your nighttime brain. Phone in another room. A rule that if you are still spiraling after 15 minutes, you get up, sit in a chair, and read something boring until your system calms down. It looks simple, but each time you follow that rule, you collect evidence. I interrupt spirals. I keep my word to myself. So start tracking small wins. The night you caught yourself catastrophizing and gently shifted to slow breathing. The evening you stuck to your lights out boundary even though the episode cliffhanger begged you to continue. The moment you got out of bed instead of stewing in anxious loops. These are not minor, they are proof that a new identity is taking root. Nighttime stops being a test of your worth and becomes a training ground. Every night, you are practicing how to align an ancient, threat-detecting brain with your modern, long-term goals, one tiny system at a time. And in the next part, we are going to raise the stakes even higher and show you how to turn your worst 2 a.m. fears into precise instructions for the life your daytime self is actually trying to build. So here is where the game really changes. Every nighttime attack stops being a verdict on you and starts being a repetition counter. Your 2 a.m. spiral is not proof that you are broken. It is simply the next rep in training your brain to follow a new pattern under stress. Most people believe that if the system is working, the intrusive thoughts should disappear. However, this view is completely misguided. The brain did not evolve to give you silence, it evolved to give you warnings. In other words, the appearance of the thought is not the problem. The real metric of discipline is how fast you move from chaos to protocol. And guess what? That shift can be ridiculously simple. You are not trying to do deep therapy at 3 a.m. You are running a tiny, pre-decided sequence. Step 1. Notice the spiral. You catch that familiar rush of anxiety. the mental slideshow of worst-case scenarios. Step 2. Name the design conflict out loud or in your head. My brain is trying to keep me safe right now, but this environment is for sleep, not problem-solving. Just that sentence tells your survival system, I see you, but we are using a different rule set here. Step 3 is the fork. Do I stay in bed with a mental technique, or do I get up and use my physical system? If your energy is low but you are still somewhat calm, you might choose a pre-planned script or breathing pattern. For example, you repeat, not now, tomorrow, me plus my notebook will handle this, while you do a slow 4-count inhale, 6-count exhale. This is because the brain confuses rumination with action. You are giving it a small, concrete action instead. In this scenario, if the spiral is too loud to ignore, your protocol might say, sit up, feet on the floor, turn on the dim light. You walk to your designated notebook, yes, always the same one, and you write down only the top 3 worries. Not 15, 3. Next line, for each worry, you schedule one tiny action for tomorrow. Email this person, check this number, block 30 minutes. Then you close the notebook, return it to the same spot, and go back to bed. You have just told your brain there is a plan. Survival is handled. Here's the most important detail. This is not about feeling calm. It is about behaving structured. You are teaching your nervous system that discomfort is a cue for discipline, not for scrolling, catastrophizing, or avoiding. Over time, that association bleeds into your daytime habits as well. The problem is that most people only practice discipline when they feel motivated. You will be practicing it when you feel cornered. The first few nights, the gap between the attack and the protocol might be 20 minutes. Then it becomes 10, then 3. That shrinking gap is your new scoreboard. You are not chasing 0 thoughts. You are chasing a faster pivot. And this is where it gets exciting, because in the next part we will take those scribbled 3 a.m. notes and show you how to turn them into precise daytime instructions, so your nights stop being random suffering and start becoming the blueprint for the life you are actually trying to build. So now, those 3 a.m. scribbles become something much more important. They become instructions for the day. Because here's the uncomfortable truth most people miss. Your nights are not random. They are a mirror. If your days are non-stop distraction, avoidance, and emotional "I'll deal with that later," your brain has no choice but to dump the entire backlog on you when everything finally goes quiet. In other words, that brutal nighttime audit is often just the unpaid invoice of how you lived the last 12 hours. This is because your brain hates open loops. Unmade decisions, unresolved tension with a friend, that email you keep dodging, the bill you should probably look at but don't. Each one is a tiny, low-grade threat. During the day, the noise of your environment keeps them in the background. At night, with no competition for attention, they move to the front row. The problem is that most people try to fix their nights at night. They download sleep apps, buy blackout curtains, and then spend the day living like a browser with 47 tabs open. And guess what? The brain simply carries that chaos into the dark. Instead, you start buying nighttime peace with small, boring daytime disciplines. You make micro decisions early. I'm answering this email now instead of I'll think about it later. You take 2-minute reflection breaks between tasks to ask, what's actually bothering me right now? You resolve the tiny conflict today instead of rehearsing imaginary arguments at 1 a.m. In this scenario, even writing down tasks in a trusted system is an act of self-defense. When your brain sees that every worry has a home on paper or in an app, it relaxes. The message is clear: we handle things when they show up. That single sentence, repeated through action, is one of the most powerful sleep aids you will ever create. And here's the most important detail: your physiology is part of this discipline. Late caffeine, chaotic schedules, and last-minute work sprints are not neutral. They keep cortisol higher, delay melatonin, and tell your nervous system, we are still on duty. Then you lie down and expect instant serenity. That is not insomnia, that is mixed messaging. So you start removing the mixed messages. You stop scheduling intense work at 10 p.m. You set a cutoff time for screens and decisions. You treat the last 90 minutes of your day as a runway, not another race. Nighttime calm is not a moral reward. It is a biological response to daytime respect. When you respect your brain's limits, its need for closure, its finite energy, it does not have to scream at you when the lights go out. In the next part, we will turn these ideas into a concrete daytime protocol, step-by-step moves you can make so that by the time your head hits the pillow, your brain's workday is already over. So now you can see the pattern. When you respect your brain during the day, it stops ambushing you at night. But to really change this, you need to understand what this night shift security guard has actually been protecting all along. Most people believe their mind just randomly attacks them before sleep. However, this view is completely misguided. Your ancient brain has been dropped into a modern environment and told, keep this person alive. That's it. No manual, no update, no distinction between a tiger in the bushes and a passive-aggressive email from your boss. This is because for most of human history, the dark was dangerous. Nighttime was when predators moved, when rival groups attacked, when one mistake could cost your life. In other words, your brain learned that when things get quiet and uncertain, that is exactly when it should scan hardest for threats. Now, fast forward to you, lying in bed, finally still. The external noise drops, the default mode network ramps up, and your brain does what it was trained to do. It starts auditing. It pulls up that weird comment you made at lunch. It replays the unpaid bill. It zooms in on that one text you have not answered. And guess what? To your brain, these are not just thoughts. They are potential threats to survival. Here's the most important detail. Your brain is not really protecting your comfort. It is protecting your social standing, your resources, your physical safety, and your sense of control. Being rejected by the group used to mean death. Losing resources used to mean starvation. Not understanding what was going on used to mean walking blind into danger. The problem is that your brain cannot tell the difference between a real, immediate threat and a long-term, manageable problem that you can schedule for tomorrow. So when it attacks you at 2 a.m., it is not being cruel. It is being loyal, misguided, overprotective, and terrible at timing, but loyal. In this scenario, your brain thinks it is doing high-level discipline, forcing you to face everything you have been avoiding. It just does not realize that this effort is destroying your sleep, your energy, and ultimately your ability to solve those problems in the first place. That is why the new approach is not to overpower or silence your mind with willpower. You are not trying to fire your security guard, you are retraining it. You are giving it better instructions, better timing, and better systems. You create a daytime worry window so your brain gets its audit done when you are awake. You build small, disciplined actions around money, messages, health, and planning, so your brain sees evidence that you are on it. When you do this, something subtle shifts. You start to feel compassion for your own mind. You realize it has been running outdated survival code on modern problems, doing the best it can with the information and structures you gave it, and now you are finally updating that code, because in the next section, we are going to take that partnership to the next level and give your brain something it has almost never had at night, proof that it can stand down. So now your brain finally has context. It is not a monster. It is a survival machine that has been left alone in the dark with no instructions. And tonight is where that changes. Let's make this very simple. Everything you've heard in this video comes down to a few core ideas. Design over willpower. You don't wrestle your brain into discipline. You build a structure that makes discipline feel like the path of least resistance. Environment over motivation. You stop asking, why am I not stronger? And start asking, what around me is silently pulling me off track? Protocols over promises. Instead of vague, I'll sleep earlier wishes, you run repeatable scripts. And partnership over war. Your mind is not the enemy. It is a powerful, anxious bodyguard that needs clear orders. And guess what? You do not need 20 changes. You need one decision that quietly rewires your night. So here's your challenge. Pick a single protocol and actually run it tonight. For real, not in theory. Option 1, a 10-15 minute mental download. Before you even see the pillow, you sit with a notebook and dump every unfinished task, fear, and don't forget onto paper. In other words, you give your brain proof that the problems are stored, so it does not have to keep them spinning for survival. Option 2, move your phone out of the bedroom, not farther from the bed, out, different room, different outlet. This is because your brain cannot relax while a glowing slot machine of stimulation is within arm's reach. The problem is that most people try to resist it with willpower at midnight instead of redesigning the environment at 8 p.m. Option 3, build a tiny pre-sleep ritual. Same sequence every night. Maybe stretch for 2 minutes, dim the lights, read one page of a book, then lights out. Nothing dramatic, just a consistent signal that tells your nervous system, we are safe, we are done for today. Now here's the most important detail. You are not proving your worth with this. You are running a 7-night experiment. That's it. In this scenario, you are the scientist and your bedroom is the lab. You are not allowed to label yourself a failure or a success. You are only allowed to observe. What happens to my energy, my mood, my nighttime thoughts when this protocol is in place? Imagine this. 7 nights from now, your evenings are not perfect, but the edges are softer. You fall asleep a little faster. The 2 a.m. attacks lose some intensity. You wake up with just enough extra control to notice, wait, my brain listened. That feeling is discipline being built, not through heroic effort, but through design. And from there, it compounds. A calmer night makes the morning easier. An easier morning makes the next decision slightly better. Your identity shifts from someone who gets ambushed by their mind to someone who builds systems that guide their mind. So here is your call to action. Before this video ends, decide your protocol for tonight. Say it out loud, write it down. Then, if you want more tools like this, more ways to work with your brain instead of against it, subscribe and dive into the other videos on habits and discipline. But above all, let tonight be the first night you stop blaming yourself and start designing your world so your brain can finally stand down.